G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off Ukraine War Update for the 4th of April 2026. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, and apparently now war is women's business, according to Vladimir Zelensky, the caretaker administrator of Ukraine. He is not elected, his term is over, and he was anointed by Parliament to remain caretaker. Technically still president. Technically. Only because he refuses to stand down. You know, everything they accuse Donald Trump of doing, their side does. Now, as we look at the map, there's been a lot of attacks on Ukraine today. There's been a few missiles, lots of drones, according to the Ukrainian Air Force, over 250. They didn't give a precise amount. Although some articles say 250, some say over. They said there's about 20 in the air still, somewhere between Kiev and Kharkiv. Who knows where they're headed, because their last update, yeah. So they've had missiles come over this way, 1, 2, 3. Over this way, towards Kharkiv. We've also had a strike on west of Dnipro, and you've had drone and missile strikes in and around the Kiev area. And we know that Polka is another supply depot point, though rarely hit. Kharkiv, the second largest city, is often hit. It's used as a communication. The post office there at one stage was used as a communications relay. And as we look around the map, there's a lot of activity with very little change. We have the update. The map is updated a little bit, but not much. Seversk, this area here and here and here. Only a few little ripples here and there. As you can see, the Russians have made some progress, but no significant town has fallen. They've gained territory here, a little bit here, nothing, which is weird, but yeah, as you can see, they've now completely withdrawn from Novovinka. No explanation, which is weird if Ukraine had fought them and won, but no, apparently end of operation, moving on, bang. So it looks like we do have a clear victory for Ukraine in Novovinka, but rather than usually they would be very, very announceful of it. Now, yeah, over the last month and before that, but yeah, so, but it looked like it was more of a land trade where, instead of two units on a weird supply line, with Ukrainians able to come between the two through here, through the crossing they couldn't control. It's more grab land here and secure. Yeah. So for every loss, there's a gain. They lost territory here, but then they gained more elsewhere. So it was a trade-off, though Ukraine would go, yay, we liberated 270 square kilometers. They lost 200 80. They lost a net of 10. Now they've lost a little bit here and there. Now they didn't lose all 280 in one go, right? They've lost over the last month 40, 40, 40, 40, 10. Some days like today, almost nothing. Now they haven't updated the map, or have they? Will they? Probably not, although they claim the Russians are actually further along here on other maps and further along in this area on other maps. There ain't much difference between various maps. But as we can see, here's where they've made the most gains. And again, Ukraine is not worried about the countryside, which does not bode well for the farmer, but they are holding on to the cities, slowing down the Russians, and hoping, of course, that over time they'd wear down the momentum, and once the Russians are out of momentum, they will turn it around. Now, this is exactly what the Russians did to the Germans in between 42, 43, 44, and by 45, by midway through 44, they were able to make huge. They were going from 1, 2, and then less than a year to Berlin, Whereas in 3 years, they've only been able to go. And again, it's scale of industry, scale of economy, right? Things cost more. People are far more reluctant to give up their current job. The mass conversion of factories in a short period of time would cripple the economy So nobody wants a mass war. Now the diplomats, it's very hard to explain, just cannot break through Zelensky. So Putin has no incentive to compromise because Ukraine won't withdraw, and they won't surrender what they've lost. They always think, and in the back of the mind, you're always wondering, there was always talk during World War II, will taking the leadership out change anything? And this time they know it won't. The best thing to do is to wear down the government they've got rather than attempt to replace them with someone more reasonable, because there is no... Anybody who's reasonable has been driven out of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian military is an obstacle to peace. They want their glory. They're so enamored with glory. So, in the past, I think about a month ago, we talked about new appropriations by the Russian military. The Russian military added about 10,000 items to the procurement orders from various sources, and one of them is long-range artillery shells. Now, this isn't just more... They didn't just order more artillery. Okay. They ordered more long-range artillery. Now, this is a precision artillery shell. Now, it is a laser-seeking artillery for various... There is Master... not Master. Sorry, what is it? Self-propelled gun. Mulver. It's one of three. Yeah. MSTAS. So you got the Mulver, Master, and the Alatuva, which was previously D20. And here's the interesting thing. Some, like the Koriska, they do actually have a 155. This is, so you got 2 long barrel and 2 short barrel, and they've still got some towed array, including the D20 in service. But we don't see much of the Koloviska. I don't know why they have, again, this is, but here, the 80 kilometers in the advanced variants. This is the really big guns. This one's a real, which is on an 8x8 chassis. These are smaller. Okay, you got, this is the big one. Malta is the big one. No, Master. This is Master. Yeah. So they got some really big, shorter barrel, and yeah. So this is the beast, and there's the firing. You can see the orange explosion of the cordite. That's so every time you see those orange explosions over Ukraine, you know they've hit ammunition. Those orange clouds. Now, there it is. They actually do have folding fins, and they do have a rocket assist. And they do strike at a very long range. And they seek a target. Now, the targets can be provided from vertical or horizontal. And the laser seeking head will look for that particular frequency of light. The gun will adjust itself. Krivestopol's been making artillery cells since the days of the Soviet Union. Yeah. Let's see. Again, we have a breakdown of modern artillery. Modern artillery shells. There we go. Do not use rocket assist. Do not use standard cordite. They have what they call a gas generator. This is basically solid fuel. It is a rocket, not an artillery shell. And they have the homing, autopilot, and a high explosive fragmenting shell, which takes up, as you can see, half the payload. And you have the fans or stabilizers. And they are giving some sort of illustration that they are able to directly target something as big as a tank. And they're alright. All-an 10 is an outdated model, by the way. All-an 30 is the current model, but this video was partly something they used at, was it Saudi Arabia, I think, recently for their exports. I think Saudi Arabia is one of the countries they sell the 155 to. Yeah. So that's the system. So more of a rocket than artillery. And it's used on light, towed, all the way down. And yes, it does have a tactical nuclear option. But if you're using the tactical nuclear option, you want the 80-kilometer range, given the 5-kilometer blast radius. Yeah, you definitely want the longer ranged artillery. Now, just quickly look around. Can you see the words corruption anywhere? Or grain? Or arrests? No? Or scandal? No? Yeah. 286 drones. Yeah, they've updated the story, by the way. It was 250 earlier. Around 20 in the airspace. They haven't corrected that, so So it started off about 200. Then the headline was 250, and updated it again. But there's no corruption scandal, right? Right. Now, Ukraine wants to acquire the US THAAD system. This is the PAC-3 variant for the Patriot. Still needs US approval. Yeah. THAAD is PAC-3. They want the longer range Patriots for high altitude intercepts. They're faster as well. Now, one of the key problems they're having in Ukraine is debris. Now, why they just don't move the intercepts outside of the city, who knows? Maybe it's the way the Russian systems arc and come down over the city in the first place. So they're not in intercept range until they're close to the city. So if they moved the systems, then they wouldn't be in intercept range, would they? And there'd be even more holes in the Ukrainian defense. So there is that likelihood. Okay, the THAAD is a high altitude interceptor for intermediate range missiles. This is for the air launched from the MiG-31s, the Kinzhals, up to 48 interceptors. So it could last anywhere from, let's see, about 12, so about 4 weeks. If Russia keeps to about 12 to 14 a week, but if it goes up to 18, it'll cut it down to 3, 2, 1. So Russia can will add the cost, right? Deciding how many Kinzhals it uses. And long-range drones. And even cheaper decoys. Now, you may dismiss this as Russian disinformation until you realize that almost a copy of a Ukrainian story that's hidden behind a paywall. Anti-corruption officials, grain fraud in Ukraine. Gotta watch an ad to watch it. It's all fogged out. This is the new voice of Ukraine. This is from the desk of her Zelensky. So, there's a bit more context in this version of the story. Now, the State Management Corporation for grain sales. Most countries' grain is sold by a state corporation where it is the agent that gets the grain to the different cartels around the world, the bread makers and the grain processors. So the grain is taken from the farmer and is on a timer, right? But usually between 30 and 60 days you get full payment or settlement, as they sometimes say, and seed, right? So this is why so many grain producers are always in debt, because they need seed before. So they order seed when they sell their grain. They get settlement 30 to 60 days later, despite these corporations sitting on billions of dollars. They could easily just turn around and sell. No, they are just such a narrow-minded, I have one job, I'm a bureaucrat, I am not capable of doing more than pressing this button here. This button is one button. That's my entire existence, is this one button. So, and I've dealt with these state organisations in the past. They are absolutely, their corruption is something that's hard to describe, because it's not criminal corruption. It is absolute adherence to the system. I have one job. I'm an NPC. Right? A wind-up doll could replace most bureaucrats. I'm sorry. Most government workers are not hardworking. It's an illusion. It's only they put most of them put the hard workers on the front line so that the rest can hide in their little office cubicles and get a good day's rest before they go home to sleep. So, an anti-corruption scheme, $17 million worth of grain. Now, it's had time and time again. Now, this is the context. Was not found not by one, but two separate investigations. And this original investigation by the Anti-Corruption Office, which was originally backed by Europe, said that this scheme dates back to 21. So before the war, Food and Grain Corporation of Ukraine signed contracts to supply corn to a foreign buyer, and allegedly colluded with the foreign buyer to hand over shipments without payment, and then later no payments were made to the farmers. How were they going to cover this all up? Well, they would draft the farmers into the war, and these farmers would not come back from the war. You see how vile corruption is, and to the extent that this is the problem. And the left will say, oh, two wrongs don't make a right. Well, isn't that amazing? Right? Sheltering illegals who entered the country illegal, right? Violating the law and then aiding and abetting, that's two wrongs, but somehow not putting these corrupt people to death who have literally murdered people, well, indirectly, but it's a system of corruption. Over tons of grain were taken, losses count, and they would do bank transactions to then deviate funds in third-party countries buying raw material at inflated prices, and then they'd get the kickbacks. Now, a number of officials, not named, face series of corruption, but not one minister. Now, apparently they're going to blame the energy minister. And Zelensky's former chief of staff. But there's more. There has to be more. There has to be other ministers involved in this, and there has to be somewhere where the media silence. Who silenced the media? That would be the State Security Bureau. So there is not just large-scale fraud in Ukraine. There's systemic, organized fraud at the highest levels in Ukraine. But apparently war is women's business, and they're taking the focus off the corruption by talking about the need to increase recruits. Now, what's behind the push? Well, Zelensky wants, we want troops of high quality. He has ordered 1 million more troops to be sent to the trenches. Now, doesn't say when this interview was originally, but I would say within the last 24, 48 hours, conducted by Sputnik with Alexander Duchat, who has said this is genocide. Well, have I not said multiple times that Ukraine is being genocided by Ukraine? And this was originally exposed as a propaganda piece where everybody thought Ukrainian women were going to be Zelensky's cannon fodder. It was dismissed originally back in November 23. But then we started seeing Ukrainian women showing up in uniform. They were taking non-combat roles. They started showing up as cooks and drivers, and this turned out to be a publicity photo for recruitment. Nevertheless, in the last 2 years, there have been increasing numbers. England did this, and I'm sure the Germans did this. They had more than just secretaries and nurses, drivers, sometimes pilots. Now, these weren't combat pilots, they were cargo pilots, So there are roles that have been given to women over the years since World War II and probably before that would fall into the normal realm. But 1 million? That's the question mark. And the question mark is because the original interview is way longer than this, and which it was implied and asked, is the 1 million more troops? Where's it coming from? Is this, and how many of them are women, given that the current recruitment poster, current recruits, war is women's business is over, current recruitment poster, and 2 days ago was initially thought to be to shame the 2 million men who have managed to flee Ukraine to come back and fight for their country, because apparently misogyny is acceptable when it's Ukraine. Same with putting women in combat roles, apparently, but apparently also protected jobs like farmers isn't so protected, and now they have a huge problem. But CIS, that's the this is a Russian research center, so take it with a grain of salt. But they are not only asking questions that you can find. There are already questions by the Ukrainian government, and even the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, and Foreign Minister from England went to Ukraine together to speak with the Ukrainian regime about and were assured that Ukraine can keep it up for another couple of years. Europe was worried that Ukraine is running out of men faster than expected. And there are other stories about NATO wondering where Ukraine is going to order more troops from. The British recently did an article saying that Ukrainian population has declined by 20 million over the last 20 years, but it's okay. And they could go back a couple of years and find Zelensky talking about how he wants to turn, before he became president, wants to turn Ukraine into a Jewish country, he said actually, where he would bring in tens of thousands of Jews from around the world to rebuild Ukraine. And lo and behold, 6 weeks later, they were at war. Sounds like Albert Speers to me. But that's just me making a guess. Now, again, I have said this. Now, the West has allegedly eliminated people in Ukraine. Allegedly. And allegedly eliminated people in Germany for speaking out against the war. Allegedly. And they've allegedly covered up, Poland has allegedly covered up corruption there as well. Particularly Ukrainian drones, Ukrainian spies involving girls as young as, maybe younger than 17, because they said she'd been in the country for 3 years. So she's 79 years old, engaged in a sexual relationship and been in the country 3 years. Where's the arrest? Yeah, exactly. All I could say is Chappie told us that there were worse places than Epstein Island and that Ukraine was one of them. Ukrainian models, Ukrainian little models, and many other organizations which you can't show on YouTube because of their content. Yes. So there is a horror in this world that goes beyond and is covered up by war and violence. And many politicians have tried to speak out over the years, end up getting JFK'd. Now, this every time, right? Someone comes out and says, "I've got dirt on Hillary." Boom. For years I've been saying, never announce you've got dirt. Do not think that you could. This is, I don't know where this comes from. This idea, particularly in England, where they stand up and say, "I'm going to give you a chance to resign and be honourable." No. You spill the beans. More and more people don't want you to get the honourable right, whatever her name is, to resign. No. They're sick of it. They want the Tories to say, right, this is every piece of dirt on X, Y, and Z. This is, instead of talking about the spies in Canada, give us their names. Okay? They've got 2 or 3 working for India, as many as 6 to 9 working for China. Is there anybody in Canada who isn't working for a foreign entity, Carney? I mean, you're working for the WEF, so, you know. And why are they still alive? They're behind the Ukraine war, by the way. So, there's no morality in this organisation. And yet, for some reason, no matter how many militant... Again, because it's Ukraine, right? Every time we're told it's a Ukrainian problem. Then shut them off. Stop sending them money, because it's ultimately your money that's being stolen. Right? You're sending... And then they say the Ukrainian people will suffer. They're going to suffer anyway, because they won't do anything. It's like asking all these people in America, stop complaining and do something. And then they just go back to complaining. So, no, you don't deserve good things because you don't do anything to deserve them. I'm sorry. Action is the only, right, reaction. You've got to stop supporting these wars. America is showing, yes, it could halt the war in Ukraine, but that will only spark a wider war, right? China has already said escalation will lead to a wider war. Russia has threatened to use tactical weapons if they've denied victory. The only thing you can do now is draw a red line, and that's it. And so far, we don't know at what point. Trump said June. Now, yeah. Let's just see. Let's see. He may have updated it. He's given them both. Yeah. June. A June deadline, June 26th. To target date was originally set in February, that there would be a push, that the pressure tactics would be applied to both sides, and there has been a shift in the deadlines, but it's when it's over, we did have multiple shifts of the deadline, So right now it's still in June. That was set when they were close to the February deadline. But that was just to get them to the table. Remember, Ukraine wouldn't come to the table. So, of course, pro-Ukrainians don't want to know. Everything to them is only our everything we want is a right. Everything you want is a privilege. Or, rules are for thee, not for me. We're the victims. You're the aggressor, so we can do anything we want to you. I mean, this cultural Marxism of selfishness is beyond the pale. Okay, you've got to stop tolerating this evil, and the only solution to Ukraine and Europe is to undo all this corruption. Angela Merkel admitted she only brought in all these people, the refugees, for votes. So, you don't think they're doing that you don't think they're doing that in America to win elections? This is how selfish the left is. They don't care who is hurt as long as they get to be in power. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video. Bye for now.